Now, the Three Martini Lunch with Greg Corombos and Jim Garrity.
And welcome, everyone, to the Tuesday edition of the Three Martini Lunch, along with Jim Garrity of National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Good, bad, and crazy martinis for conservatives today. And we start with the good, which is directly connected to Thursday's 6th Republican presidential debate hosted by the Fox Business Network. It will be held in South Carolina. And on Monday night, Fox News announced the lineup for the main debate. It included Donald Trump, Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, Ben Carson, Chris Christie, Jeb Bush, and John Kasich. That means that in addition to the usual undercard folks who haven't already dropped out, there will be two new faces. Carly Fiorina will be back there for the first time since the first debate, and Rand Paul is headed there. But Rand Paul is not taking this news lying down. Speaking with Wolf Blitzer right when the announcement was made, Paul says, I ain't doing no undercard.
It's a rotten thing to do to try to designate which candidates have a chance and don't, and so we will not participate in anything that's not first tier.
Jim, we've been pretty critical of the undercard. We understand why it was thought of, considering the number of candidates in the race, and it's hard to pack 17 people on stage, which is how many we had at one point. But in the end, it was largely ignored. And Rand Paul, kudos to you for understanding that this is a non-event, and you might get more attention by boycotting than if you actually showed up.
Yeah, people might be asking, why is this the good martini? Well, look, this was a bad system for the debates. As much as you kind of sympathize with the networks having, I believe at one point, 15, 16, 17 candidates, I don't think this system of the undercard debate, the grown-up table, kiddie table, whatever metaphor you want to use, I don't think it worked well because there were the only one who jumped from the undercard to the main stage was Carly Fiorina. Rick Perry, Bobby Jindal, Rick Santorum never actually made the jump to the big stage. And I kind of feel like whatever you think of those guys, all of them deserved at least one shot to be up there on the big stage. Even George Pataki, even Jim Gilmore. Give everybody one shot to make their case, and maybe they catch fire. Or maybe they flop. But if you're going to have 10 to 12 debates, I think everybody deserves one chance in prime time. It was kind of this self-fulfilling prophecy that you couldn't get on the main stage if you couldn't get above a certain level in the polls. But the flip side was you couldn't get above a certain level in the national polls if you weren't on the main stage for the debate.
Right.
And then obviously you ended up with a circumstance where you'd have like 10 or 11 people on the main stage and then only 4 or 5 in the undercard. So you'd actually get more time to talk in the undercard debate than you did on the main stage. Rand Paul is probably deeply disappointed. This is, if not a death knell for his campaign, certainly a ominous dark cloud above it. But ultimately, somebody had to say, you know what, this system is stupid. It's not working for us. It's not fair. It rewards the front runners. It punishes you if you try to put effort into a particular state like Iowa or New Hampshire. And so, hey, good for you, Rand Paul. Maybe he will get more attention like that. Either that or he will fade away. But at least it's fine to see somebody say, you know what, I don't like this process. I don't have to participate in this process. I'll take my chances without the debates, and we'll see how it works out for Rand Paul.
Rand Paul defying large bureaucratic organizations. Who would have seen that one coming? So anyway, Chris Christie did briefly bounce down to the lower debate and came back, but I think it was all a matter of the criteria for the debate, not because his number in the national polls changed all that much.
Yeah, at one point, apparently my understanding is his response to the networks was, this means war. Greg, does that mean Rand Paul is now a warmonger? Tisk, libertarian friends say. Anyway.
Not regime change. He just wants him off his lawn, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, on to the bad martini now. And there is a twinge of good here because tonight is the 7th and final State of the Union address to be delivered by President Barack Obama. So the good part is that it's his last one. The bad news is that he's apparently going to make it a doozy. In addition to having a Syrian refugee as a guest and an empty seat to represent all those lives lost by gun violence, we get this from CNN. The White House says President Barack Obama's State of the Union address Tuesday night will be non-traditional. What that means? Obama will be talking about himself, not asking Congress for a long list of items he knows he'll never get. Obama will deliver his final State of the Union address a week after bypassing Congress by using his executive authority to expand gun rules. He could use the speech to highlight other issues on his agenda that he'll address without the help of Congress, like Guantanamo Bay. echoing previous executive actions on everything from immigration, carbon dioxide emissions, and restarting diplomatic relations with Cuba. We're also supposed to get quite the victory lap, Jim, and I use that term in quotation marks, about all the fabulous successes like Obamacare and the climate treaty and the Iran nuclear deal. So have your bingo card, your drink, and your nausea bag close at hand tonight.
Stay tuned at National Review Online. I have a piece that should be going up around mid-morning about how the State of the Union is not strong. In fact, we have quite a few big problems here. And a lot of these problems have gotten worse under Obama's tenure, particularly worse in the second term. I go through the problems with Obamacare, the lingering problems with the economy, and how the low unemployment rate kind of obscures the more lingering and perhaps even more serious issue of wage stagnation, and obviously all the issues we've had with ISIS and concerns about terrorists coming through either porous borders or insufficient screening of people coming into the country. I can hear all of our listeners saying, well, I'm not going to watch, Jim. Greg, I know what you're complaining about. Greg, I don't know about you. I have to watch. It's part of the job. If he ends up, having a sneezing fit or Joe Wilson gets irritated, you just don't know what's going to happen during these things. Does Nikki Haley suddenly, shrivel up like a raisin from dehydration? It can happen during these things. That's what almost happened to Marco Rubio. Obviously, look, it's going to be painful. It's the last one under this guy, and there's no reason to watch this, America. Let's just get through this.
Jim, you think there's a chance he might lecture America and Republicans?
I think his farewell address is going to be some version of, America, you have deeply disappointed me. You didn't deserve me. But you'll miss me. You'll have no idea. You have no idea how good you had it under me. You're just a bunch of ingrates. And that'll be kind of the closing note of the Obama era. But,
All right. Well, back to the effort to replace Barack Obama in the White House. And, of course, we're now less than 3 weeks away from the first votes in Iowa. A week after that, plus a day, comes New Hampshire, and then obviously South Carolina later in February. And one of the interesting developments in this campaign, of course, is the increasingly frosty relationship between Jeb Bush and his one-time protege, Marco Rubio. Jeb's been pretty much on the offensive against Marco Rubio, but his SuperPAC, Right to Rise, has come out with a curious ad looking at Rubio's ever-changing position as it sees it on immigration.
Marco Rubio. He ran for Senate saying he opposed amnesty. Then he flipped and worked with liberal Chuck Schumer to co-author the Path to Citizenship bill. He threatened to vote against it and then voted for it. He supported his own DREAM Act, and then he abandoned it. Marco Rubio. Just another Washington politician you can't trust. Jeb Bush. He's a leader, so you always know where he stands. Right to Rise USA is responsible for the content of this message.
So, Jim, I guess the reading of the tea leaves of the frustration in the Republican base has led Jeb Bush, or at least a SuperPAC, to conclude that his best path to the nomination is to convince people that he's the most consistent immigration squish.
The irony is that this is an element of George W. Bush's reelection campaign in 2004. He was running against John Kerry. John Kerry had famously said, I actually voted for the $87 billion before I voted against it,
yes.
Trying to explain his position and, in fact, seeming to be more confused and unclear than ever. And, George W. Bush, part of the reelection pitch was to say, look, you may not always agree with me, but you always know where I stand. And a lot of people who may not have been on board with everything George W. Bush said, agreed with the assessment that George W. Bush was not a guy who was going to be vague or tricky or spin or try to take two sides of the issue simultaneously. It worked for him. I don't know if this is going to work for this case by Jeb Bush, because the idea is it may do damage to Rubio. It's harder to see how this helps Jeb, considering the overwhelming mood of the party right now on the issue of immigration. My colleague Ramesh Ponnuru is now making the intriguing point that the immigration issue is now turning into what the abortion issue used to be. It was not an absolute guarantee that everybody who was pro-life would be a conservative down the line on every other issue, but you had a pretty good chance that if somebody was willing to take the heat on the media's criticism of being pro-life, they'd take the criticism for cutting the budget and doing all these other terrible things that Republicans are always accused of doing. The flip side is, if somebody was pro-choice, thinking of Arlen Specter types, all of a sudden they were the types who were more likely to go along with big government spending. It was kind of either you could say a litmus test issue, or you could say it was just kind of a key indicator of the philosophy and kind of governing approach of a certain lawmaker. It's just hard to imagine that people are going to turn around and say, yeah, I'm really upset with Marco Rubio's flip-flopping. Even though I oppose illegal immigration and I want to deport all those people, I'm going to turn around and embrace Jeb Bush. I just don't see how it gets there. Bush may have the single best taste in reading material of the entire Republican field. And that's just because he was recently photographed holding a copy of The Weed Agency.
Yes. I hope he knows about heavy lifting.
Heavy lifting is also really good, but you know what? I'll take him holding up Weed Agency. That's fine. Don't ask for more, all right? Regnery will be upset, but Random House will be very happy, and I'm not going to worry about that. So.
Well, very good taste there, Governor Bush, in the Weed Agency. Fascinating, though, on immigration, Jim, about nobody's really got super clean hands on this. We've talked about Ted Cruz at one point, at least officially favoring legalization, but now saying he never did. You got Rubio and obviously the whole Gang of Eight thing, and now his argument against Cruz is that, well, Ted Cruz was almost as squishy as I was on this issue. And now you got Jeb Bush with an ad saying that Marco Rubio said he was opposed to amnesty, but he supported pathway to citizenship, which is exactly what Bush does. And you got Donald Trump, who now is the hawk on this issue, but he says Mitt Romney lost because he was too tough on immigration.
And oh, by the way, who's building all those Trump projects? Every single one of those workers is totally legal, right, Greg? Right? There we go.
Politics are fun. Jim, survive tonight. We'll talk about it tomorrow, and then hopefully we can forget about it forever.
Yeah, I think I know what tomorrow's bad martini is going to be.
We may have multiple bad martinis, maybe all three. We'll see. Jim, have a good day. Talk to you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Garrity of National Review. I'm Greg Columbus of Radio America. Thanks for being with us today, and please tune in again on Wednesday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.